Welcome Mukul Kumar to this CTQ Smartcast.
Hi, Harish, how are you? Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thanks, Mukul. Really looking forward to this. So I'll do a quick introduction of you to our listeners. So Mukul Kumar is the co-founder and president engineering at Pubmatic. Pubmatic helps app developers and publishers maximize their revenue by being a sell-side platform of choice for agencies and advertisers. So we'll, in the next few minutes, we'll also get you to just talk a bit about Pubmatic in case, some of our listeners are not completely aware of what this means. But before we get there, Mukul, just wanted to, set some context for the next hour of our conversation. So, Choose to Think helps teams and individuals build future relevance in a shape-changing world. And we do this via systematic upleveling. So, in this context, we wanted to pick your brains to learn about scaling of the product, organization, culture, besides how you think about your own future relevance. So that's how we will, shape our questions today to get the maximum juice out of you in the next hour. So that we can actually apply some of those lessons into developing future relevance for both individuals and organizations. So let's get started.
Sure, great.
Yeah. Yes. So, if you can quickly talk about, what Pubmatic does, in a couple of sentences, if you can just explain to people who are not, the uninitiated about the sell side platform, what does all that mean?
Sure. Pubmatic, as you've seen, was founded 14 years ago with the vision that data-driven decisions would be the future of advertising, right? And over that time, we have invested significantly in developing our platform. Our platform is actually the key. Our platform and our infrastructure, that is, one of the key things that we have built from a product perspective, from a scaling perspective. And by harnessing our massive data asset, which is the other big asset that we have, and leveraging our sophisticated machine learning algorithms, we increase publisher revenue. And by publisher, I mean, like a website such as such as Times of India, such as New York Times, or an e-commerce site. We increase the publisher revenue and advertiser return on investment, and increase marketplace liquidity. By liquidity, I mean increasing the amount of impressions available or inventory available for bidding, right? So that buyers can buy more impressions, and then making more audiences available to the buyers. So this also improves the cost efficiency, which we provide in our technology platform and which publishers and buyers use. So we built our, this SSP platform, which is the sell side platform, and basically which also extends to the buyers. At a high level, like I explained, we help publishers, we also help buyers. On the other side, the publishers are websites, large websites, large, app makers, mobile app makers that use our platform to basically increase their revenue. And then we work with really large advertisers to help them increase their return on investment on their advertising spends.
Right. So, based on what you've described, Mukul, I can clearly see that, what we are seeing here is a platform, and you also, use the word scaling there. So, just wanted to talk to you about the last 14, 15 years. I know, you started in Pune in 2006 to an IPO in 2020. So, if you can just briefly talk about Pubmatic's journey and what would say be the three big lessons that entrepreneurs can take from Pubmatic's journey.
Yeah, I think that's probably my most liked question. So let me jump in and talk about that a little bit. So in 2006, I met my other co-founders, and we met and we discussed the idea of optimizing ads to help publishers. And we thought, we kind of discussed that, and we thought, yeah, it's a good idea. Let's do it. Right. So we started in my 3-bedroom house in Pune, like we were just talking. And then we started developing codes, and in 3 months we did our alpha, right?
Okay.
We had a customer that we used that software, and I remember I used to watch the ads being served, right? I used to see the log files, serve the ads, and I used to see like the first 1,000 impressions being served in a day, right? And today we are serving more than 100 billion impressions a day. In Q1 we served more than 200 billion impressions a day. So that's a pretty significant growth. That's more than 100 million times scale up,
Right.
right? So a pretty significant scale up, and I think the journey has been really interesting. There are really great memories, and initial we did face the bootstrapping challenges. The key thing there in my mind, and which will go towards a little later also, is to have the focus, have great bias, heavy bias towards action, and keep customers first, right? So let me talk about that a little bit. We used to develop code very fast, very quickly. We used to iterate in hours rather than days. So that was one of the key things of keeping customers first and having a heavy bias for action. So instead of like discussing or thinking about whether something will work or not, I would implement that. I would, try it out. Lots of different examples where that really helped us. The other thing is really having really great clarity and focus on what you want to build, right? So there is a lot of different ideas that keep coming when you brainstorm these ideas with other people. Obviously that's an important part of the process, where you brainstorm with people outside the founding team too. But it's really important to keep your vision in front of you and keep your clarity and focus, and then be very aligned to the goals that you have. It is very easy to get diverted. Somebody comes and says, you know what, Mukul, I think you can try this. Somebody else is trying I don't know, audio advertising. Let's try that. And then you can easily get diverted. So it's really important to think about what your vision is, what your long-term focus is, and then keep that focus. Just a small anecdote that maybe I'll like to touch upon,
Yeah.
which shows like the heavy bias for action, is when the first we wrote our ad server, and I remember this really clearly. It was written in Java, right? And it was very slow and it was consuming a lot of memory. And we troubleshooted it for days. I remember, sitting through nights troubleshooting it. And then we debugged it. We made it faster. We made it almost 4 or 5 times faster. But we actually wanted like an order of magnitude. We wanted a 10x or a 20x improvement in performance. And one fine day, we were just, myself and my other co-founder were just discussing, brainstorming, and then we did something. We came back, and the performance was 10x than like a day and a half before. What we did was we rewrote the entire ad server in C language in about 36 to 48 hours period.
Right.
So pretty interesting. I mean, I think that culture is still there in the company, where there are new ideas and new ways of solving problems that are constantly being tried, and people, engineers and other co-workers are heavy bias for action.
Right. Yeah. So if I have to
Yeah.
sum up those three lessons, it would be customer centricity, bias for action, and being dedicated to your vision. Right.
Yeah, focus and clarity. So very
Correct.
strong focus and clarity. I think clarity is really important. You will, I mean, I think I have a lot of anecdotes, but one example is, you're getting on a call with somebody who is doing a startup in a similar domain, and they tell you, you know what, Mukul, there's somebody else who is doing something else, or they are doing this on a different platform. They're using a different platform, like a PHP platform or something else, and they are very successful. And then you get diverted. That okay, let me try that. Let me see how that goes. So that is a very important um, uh, you know thinking process that the founder needs to have, where they need to be able to differentiate between what is really that they want to build, and how they want to build it. While you don't want to take feedback from other people, but then you also want to know what feedback do you not want to take, or what feedback do you want to ignore, and continue with your vision.
Right.
Yeah,
That's very interesting, Mukul, because like we always say, you have to fail fast and you have to keep experimenting. But
yeah,
in the service of being experimenting all the time, you cannot keep having a Brownian motion all the
exactly.
time as well, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, I think that's very interesting. Where you are headed has to be very clear.
yeah. And
So
let me
that you
just
don't.
add to that a little bit, if I may.
Right.
It is, I mean, a part of that is also to identify the customer segment that you want to address,
Right.
right? I mean, there's like probably half a dozen other things, but like which customer segment, which market segment do you want to address? That's really important because you are constantly thinking about, okay, how do I help that customer segment? So we chose publishers, right? So in our initial period when we started, and then we were very focused on that until we started extending about 4 or 5 years ago. We started extending to the buyer side too. So that's really important. What you want to do, what is the customer segment that you want to focus, what is the problem that you're trying to solve. Yeah, absolutely super important.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And Mukul, again, when you spoke about how the product has scaled, right?
Yeah,
Looking at the number of impressions and the number of ads that are being served, that's in my mind that's the outcome, right? Where you've reached now. But in the process to reach there, you
yeah,
would have had to have scaling across multiple fronts, right?
yeah,
Product is one thing, you can think of the architecture right from the beginning, and you're doing REST and APIs or whatever you need to do to make the product scale.
yeah,
But the organization culture, systems, the way people think, all
yeah,
of that has to scale if the company has to scale, right? So how
yeah,
did you scale across each of these fronts?
yeah. Yeah, let me talk about, I think you touched on the two right topics, which is, scaling the architecture, scaling the software, and then scaling the culture, the team. So let me touch upon both of those. And I mean, I think in terms of scale, I feel that the software or the system architecture has been really critical because, like I said, we have scaled like 100 million times, right? So there's no other scaling that just there's no other scaling that can compare like 100 million scale. So I mean, you might have seen our latest earnings, but we processed over 18 trillion impressions in the first quarter of this year, Q1 of this year, and this double what we processed the same period last year. So it has doubled, right? So, and we do expect to increase the total number of impressions processed in 2021 by over 60% compared to 2020. So I think that's really key. Is how are you thinking about the software architecture? Uh, there is a process. You obviously talk to a number of industry experts, and like I said just a few seconds ago, you need to understand what are the things that you want to that you want to hear, that you want to imbibe, and what are the things that you don't want to. We have been, I'm happy to say, really good at scaling the technology platform, and that is done by re-architecting the platform constantly. You're constantly thinking about how can I handle like a 10x more data volume, how can I handle 10x more deal volume, how can I handle like a 10x more number of things going live into the system. So as we increase the impression volume, we are also increasing the number of publishers, we are increasing the number of buyers, the number of deals that go through our system. So you need to think through all of that, every engineer. So that has to go into the culture of the company, right? Where each engineer is thinking, it's not like a post coding thought where, okay, now that we've coded it, let's think about how do we scale it. And it's not just scaling, it's also about low latency, right? when you are serving these ads, you need to have really low latency. In our platform, we are talking about 10 or 20 milliseconds. So anybody, let's say, who increases the latency by 2 or 3 milliseconds is doing a not so great job, right? So you need to think about, you need to get into that cultural thinking process. At the same time, what we are very proud of is our platform being very efficient, our infrastructure being very efficient. So you don't want the cost to increase at the same rate as you're increasing the impression volume. In fact, you want to cost to go down per 1 million ad impressions served. So that's again a very, I would say, specific thinking process that each engineer has to have in their training process, in their day-to-day discussions, that okay, I'm adding these 100 lines of code, or I'm adding this new lock, I'm adding this new memory allocation. How do I make sure that it's not going to increase the CPU utilization or the memory utilization significantly? So that's one element, I think, which is the software side of the element. The other side, in terms of um, making sure that we're building a great culture and great values in the company is, it starts from the beginning, which is hiring great talent, right? And that kind of goes with also hiring engineers and non-engineers with great attitude, problem solving attitude. They need to think on their feet, and then we constantly been thinking about how do I solve a problem in the best possible way. And then, we also, at least in the initial years, we looked at startup culture. To some extent, we do look at it, some elements of it, even right now. For example, the can-do attitude, right? Like, I have a problem, can I solve it? Yes, I can. So you don't want, you want less of people, we say, where we think of some ways of not solving the problem, right? And then the other thing I think which is really critical in the culture is nobody says it's not my problem, right? So I was just watching an upgrade happening on our systems yesterday. We had a kind of a weekend upgrade, and it was great to see that nobody, felt shy of taking responsibility. There were like more than a couple of dozen people that were working, and then everybody took every problem and then solve it, instead of saying, yeah, let me find somebody who can solve it, or let's look at it some other time. So I think that is really important. It you'll see that coming when somebody talks, an engineer talks, or a solution engineer talks to you, where how you know how are they solving problems, how are they aligned towards looking at the problem, jumping on it and solving it. And that, in my mind, that's a critical part of our hiring process too. It also, the last thing that I'll like to touch on that is, it also is really important that the top leadership or the leadership shows the way. So the leadership is really important. You need to have the leaders, including myself, show the way. So, an example is several years ago when we were moving to a different version of Linux in our data centers. I remember that our ad server was not working for after a lot of trying, and I remember we had a critical deadline. So I just said that let me drop what I'm doing, and I went and sat with the team, about 4 or 5 people at that time, and I went into great details. I remember working on that problem for like 18 or 20 hours straight. Went into great details. We had the entire 3 or 4 people sitting with me, and then we found the problem after about 6 or 7 hours. Um, and then we solve it. So really important to show your team why it is important to get into the details. I remember there were some details that were being missed. Some folks were making some assumptions about how things were done, how the header files were being used. And, I kind of figured out that the header files were not being used the way they were assumed to be used. And the second thing was important, that you don't get up until you solve the problem. So I sat with the team, and I think I showed the way. And that goes with the team even now, right? 8 or 9 or 10 years after we did that Linux upgrade. So I'm really, really, really excited and happy to have such a team. And it has been I take a lot of pride in that.
Yeah, yeah. I can clearly see that in your face, Mukul, when you're talking about that. So
Yeah.
I can really, appreciate that. So a related question to that, Mukul, is that, like I said, I can see that pride when you're talking about this, about your team, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about expanding the people, expanding the team, and here you're talking about an organization which is spread across multiple locations, multiple countries, offices. So how does this then scale to people? How do
Yeah.
you make sure that the same childlike excitement that I can see on your face when you're talking about your team, how does that extend to the person, the manager who's just been hired like last month
Yeah.
in some remote location of yours?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good question. And like I said, like I touched on two things there. The leadership is really the key, and you have touched on that too. The leadership is the key. You need to build the right kind of leadership, and you need the leaders to drive the rest of the team, including the hiring process, right? You need to constantly tell your people, how can this be done, right? When you are, I constantly challenge my team a few times a year, where we are talking about software optimizations. So can you make this 10x faster? Can you make this, do something at 1/10 the latency? Initially people are working on 20% or 30% improvement. You ask them to think out of the box. You get them together, ask them to think out of the box. So that's really important. You're driving the people to think, right? And the other thing is, couple of things that I'm thinking which helped us is also that when you expand the team to different locations, you're actually not, you're actually, we had our leaders go to those locations. I visit the remote locations myself. Before we had COVID, I used to visit every quarter. And then our leaders, they actually moved to those remote locations for longer durations to build the teams there, so that the culture is propagated into those new locations going forward. I think those are some of the keys. The other thing which is really important is we constantly are on Zoom, and then prior to COVID, we were constantly meeting. So like I said, I used to visit every quarter, and we had leaders coming in. We had an annual offsite where the teams would meet. We hope that that'll come back very soon, like a physical offsite. So there, the team members would get together, and we'll talk about all these out of the box ideas. How do I scale the software 10x faster? How do I make this consume less CPU or less memory? The other thing I think which is also important is having these processes, right, around design reviews, around code reviews, which make sure that people are thinking, their thinking is aligned. When you're thinking of like things like introducing a new lock, or you're thinking about how you're doing memory allocations, or you're thinking about how you're doing caching, right? So you have these design guidelines, which is kind of helping you think that, what I'm talking about, 1 or 2 millisecond latency is a big deal. So I cannot, let's say, be doing something that would add significant latency. So those design guidelines also help a lot. our architects, our system architects help make sure that those design guidelines are also well percolated into the system. Everybody understands why we need those, and everybody then follows them at a cultural level. They're culturally aligned to those design principles.
Right, right. Yeah. And I'm sure that's a very, interesting tension that you're talking about, right? Where if you want to scale, you need to have systems, you need to think long term, but latency cannot be, sacrificed for scaling. And that can be, there is some tension there, right? So how do you balance the two?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it has been, I would say, I would say it's not easy, right? So, um, I, it's always, it has to be into the system. It has to, you have to imbibe that as a part of the culture, right? You're constantly re-architecting the software with the thing in mind that you have to scale this, um, 2x or 5x or 10x. At the same time, you are expected not to increase the latency by a certain amount of time. So when you are thinking through, I mean, many times when you're like solving the day-to-day problems, you may say that no, it is not possible. Just getting it 20% faster has been so tough. How can you talk about 2x or 3x? And that's when we take a step back. We get onto like a offsite kind of a setting where we think out of the box that, what if we totally rewrote this? What are the assumptions that we're making about things like databases, things like, the systems where the data is being pulled? It could be like a in-memory database, or it could be an in-disk database. What are the assumptions that we're making? What if we change those assumptions, right? What if everything is in the memory, right? So yeah, I mean, I think you have to strike that balance. It's not super easy. You have to constantly be aware that I need to, improve the scale, but at the same time, I'm not going to, decrease the or increase the latency or the throughput. And one of the other things which has been important, and needless to say, we have really good benchmarking tools that our teams have developed. So these things are very caught very early. So if you do add latency, if you do, if the throughput does go down, it is immediately caught in our CI pipeline or in our testing processes, that, what, this is not going to work. Let's go back to the drawing board, and let's rework this. So I won't say it has been easy, but I think, like I said, the constant, uh, behavior or the culture of can-do attitude and the bias towards action, like let's not brainstorm it, or let's not put it on whiteboard for 6 months, but let's put it, this talk about it for a week or 2 weeks, and then let's implement, let's do a POC, let's build something. One of the other things I'll touch upon quickly is also our hackathons have been really critical.
Right.
We do 2 hackathons every year. There's one that is coming up in a month. And the hackathons, the engineers come up with their own ideas. A lot of times they come up with these ideas that, okay, I want to get this 10x faster. Like, I want to get this creative scanning, which is basically scanning of the ad creatives, either like a static or a video creative, scanning those in kind of like hundreds of thousands or millions of those in like a very fast time, like in few seconds or a few minutes. So how can I do that 10x faster, or how can I do 10x more in the time that I'm taking right now? And I'm happy to say that the hackathons actually provide a lot of a platform that helps those engineers try out those ideas and show those ideas. And I'm happy to say that a lot of these great ideas come out of those hackathons. So I think almost 30-40% of the projects that are demoed in the hackathons, they make it to our product, and many of them make it to customers, right? A lot of them make it to our own internal customers, And a lot of those actually are about scaling, where our teams are constantly thinking about how we solve it. And then we talk about those to our entire company. We have big awards. So basically that culture is further propagated, right? When
Right.
other engineers see or other team members see that, you know what, this is a great thing to do, this is something to take a lot of pride in. So other engineers are also encouraged to do that, to write software that scales, to write software that can make more revenue, less latency, and so on and so forth.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point that you mentioned there, Mukul, about putting the spotlight on these bright spots.
Yeah,
When you see people among you being encouraged to display the right kind of behavior, then you also want to do the same thing. I think that's,
yeah,
and then it becomes infectious.
yeah,
Not the right kind of word to use in these climbs,
yeah,
but yeah, I think that's what you're looking for.
yeah,
So
yeah,
great.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, coming to the next, next question, Mukul, how difficult or easy was it to build a product company from India?
Yeah,
Where you're looking for the right kind of people in a country which has traditionally been an IT services kind of a, kind of a geography, right? So,
yeah,
both hiring the right kind of people for product development and selling globally, right?
yeah.
So how did you manage that, and any concrete example of how you address the kind of challenges you faced during this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely, have, I would say, we have built a great team, and I have a lot of experience in, building that great team and that great product. And so, getting to the product mindset is really important. That's a mindset that has to be built. And I'll talk about that a little bit and potentially a couple of concrete examples. So that is really important. It's, I won't say it's very easy. You have to, choose the right set of people that A, would lead this, and then B, who could be a part of the team that have the product mindset, right? So what is the product mindset? And this is my definition. Obviously, I'm sure there's probably a few others. So, the most important is thinking long term. So you're not thinking a project, kind of a 6 month or 3 month or a 1 year kind of a project thought process, but you're thinking long term. So you're thinking of the entire software life cycle. I'm thinking about this new idea right now. I'm going to design it, build it, deploy it onto the servers, and then I'm going to support this for the next 5 6 years. So so what am I thinking about it, right? I'm thinking about scaling this, in a year, or maybe even sooner. I'll have to re-architect it. I have to re-architect parts of it so that something that, like I said, like deals, like we have what is called PMP deals, private marketplaces deals. So I was, let's say, getting a few hundred deals onto the platform a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. Now I gotta get 10x more deals onto the platform. And it's not just, like a UI scale thing, but it's also that those deals are really large data structures that have to be available to the ad serving, which takes just a few milliseconds. So you're talking about adding potentially, hundreds of kilobytes or megabytes of fast accessing memory into the whole ad serving process. So long term thinking is really important. You're thinking, when I'm coding right now, I'm thinking that, what happens when I will scale this 2x or 3x or 5x? What happens when, when there's a problem in this software? How will I debug this? What kind of coding should I put? What kind of code should I put so that it's easier to support this? Some customer reports a problem. How is it easy to support this? How am I making sure that there are enough monitoring into the system, so that, once, let's say, I design this software to support 100 objects, or 1,000 objects, when it grows to 100,000 objects, and let's say it doesn't scale well, what kind of alerts or monitoring that I put so that I know about it, so that I can start thinking about scaling this, right? So that's really key. Thinking long term, thinking about scale is really important. I touched on that. The can do attitude is really important. You have to understand that there is no software that can be written that will just run forever for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. You have to constantly, be thinking, customers are changing how they use the software. The market is changing. Like for example, display advertising that was very popular 8, 9 years ago or 6 years ago. Now you have much more mobile, much more video, and most recently you have much more OTT and CTV. So things are changing, and therefore, how do how are you going to change the software to handle those new aspects? There are new protocols that come in, new RTB protocols that come in, new, kind of mobile protocols that come in. So I think for that, the can-do attitude is really important. You can easily hit a wall where say that, I designed this for handling so and so. I designed this for handling display advertising. I designed this for handling only HTTP traffic, or I designed it for handling such a throughput or such a QPS. It cannot go up to that level. So guess what? Things are going to change. Customers and the market are going to change. So for example, Google or Chrome is doing away with third-party cookies, and we are working with a number of different partners, what is called identity partners, for ensuring that there is enough addressability, audience addressability. So guess what? Our engineers have to think through how our software changes to address that. So that can-do attitude is really important. You are thinking through the entire, gamut of how, the world is changing, and how am I changing my software. And you're not waiting for somebody to tell you that, Mukul, this new thing is coming up, and in 6 months you'll probably have to start thinking about it. You're actually aware of that, and you're constantly thinking, how am I going to change my software, how am I going to change my APIs to handle that. um, and that goes along with, I think I touched on that, but thinking end to end, right? Thinking end to end is really important. By that I mean, you're thinking for the entire product, not just your own specific module. So I'm a UI engineer. I'm also only thinking about how I can, like, let 10,000 deals be live on the system. But I'm also thinking about, what happens when the other modules receive this in the flow of event. So I'm thinking end to end. I'm thinking end to end for software architecture. I'm thinking end to end for software testing. Like, how is this going to be tested for ad delivery? Even when I'm a UI engineer. Uh, I'm thinking from a support perspective, how is the monitoring going to work for across the board? So really critical to think end to end. So those are some of the key things, and I think some of those are, some people have that kind of experience. A lot of that has to be taught and has to be built, and has to come from the leadership in the team, that, what, we need to think about it like this. We need to think end to end, we need to think long term, we need to think about scaling, we need to have the can do attitude.
Right.
Yeah, I think those are really critical. I hope that answers the
Yeah,
question.
yeah. In fact, you also touched upon my next question on that, because the kind of things that you're talking about are, basically just you've increased your horizons, right? You're
Yeah.
not looking at your specific role or your specific project. Just that changing from that project mindset to thinking of the entire product life cycle. I think that itself is a very market change and shift in mindset. Do you see that in young students coming through into the company? Do you see that awareness of what it takes to be working in a product company?
I think I do. I think I do. I'm happy to say that I see a lot of new campus hires lot of new young engineers that I hire, they have a lot of that mindset. They are especially thinking about innovative ways of scale. So in fact, in our last hackathon, we had one team that won an award that was entirely from our campus hires, like 6 months into the system. So they, they show that enthusiasm, they show that innovation. They are thinking about how do I scale, how do I have that can do attitude, like I mean, the good thing about them is that they have fresh minds, so they don't have that mindset or the background about the assumptions, or about like the experience of assumption that this is built on a pipe that can only handle data at the rate of XQPS, but so they are not making those assumptions. So a lot of times that helps them, that they're assuming that they have infinitely big pipelines, and they have so that kind of resets that assumption. So that that helps quite a lot. I think the things that are built in through that process is thinking long term. That has to be built. Obviously they are not in the system for long, so they have to be taught how to think long term, and that kind of goes with the design and coding practices or the processes where, let's say, you bring up a new allocation mechanism, either a memory allocation mechanism or some other resource allocation, and you are allocating too much of that, then a design guideline would guide them towards, what, I think it'll be a great idea to use less memory, or something needs to change. But that's that's something that will be taught as a part of the process. But I do see a lot of uh, I'm very encouraged to see that the newcomers have a lot of that thinking about scale, the system knowledge, can do attitude, all that is coming in. So I feel really good about that.
Great, great. Yeah, yeah. That's nice to hear, Mukul. So if I were to ask you, if I'm going to put you in the spot here. So what do you know about building product companies in India that others don't?
Yeah, I think good question. I you know a couple of things that I have talked about, in maybe in a with a few people, but are really important, are key to me, which I feel is less. I mean, I'm not saying that others don't know, but I mean, number one, to me, has been never take no for an answer that it cannot be done, right? So that goes across the board. So I remember when we used to talk to some really great experts in advertising 14 years ago, when we started, and we were two people sitting in a city that nobody knows about, from Los Angeles or from the Bay Area, and we were on a conference call with them, and they would tell, what, Mukul, this is not possible. You would not get this kind of a latency. You'll suffer in the performance. This is not possible. Just stop doing this. Go back to something else, right? And at the end of the call, we'll say, great, I'll prove this person wrong. I'll prove this guy wrong. So I would never take a no for an answer. I would work, 18 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours, and build a system that would attain that level of low latency and high performance and high throughput. So I feel that that's really important, and I I think that's like a superpower,
Right.
right? The same goes along with something like it cannot be done. Just the extension of that is, it was true even a little later, when we hired a few engineers, and so I remember in a meeting years ago, when I used to code, but then I was handing it over to another engineer that I hired, very hesitantly, because I still wanted to code. But I did hand it over to that engineer, and at one point in a meeting, she said that this cannot be done. I don't think this can be done. And I told her, don't challenge me, because I know that I can do it. So you know, that's just the attitude that you gotta have, that you just don't take no for an answer. You just know inside that anything is possible. I can do anything. And not just to the folks that are sitting right next to you, which you can compare yourself with, but I was doing that with folks who are 15 years older to me, and who had done advertising, software development for much more longer. I was just a few months into coding, and they were 10 years into coding for advertising systems. And I said that, no, I can do it. So I feel that those are really important. And I feel that, it still happens, and it still goes into the system. Yeah. And those are superpower.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that we are getting more of a peek into your own personal side of things, I wanted to ask a question, Mukul. Was your career arc a natural progression from moving from an engineering leader kind of a role to being a co-founder?
Sure.
Right, because suddenly you're even for you, your work, the horizons change a lot.
Yeah.
So, what helped you make that switch?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And so, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Um, Probably 10 years or 8 years, actually less than that, maybe 6 years after I started my career. Yeah, maybe about 8 to 9 years. So I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to create something. I wanted to build something. I wanted to, build something from scratch, and, show that this can be done. And so that was there from a long time. And so I was always looking for an opportunity to an idea, or a co-founder, to do something, and to create something of my own, and to basically show the world that it can be done. So I think it was mostly my own desire, and my other co-founder, who was, I constantly exchanged my ideas with my other co-founder, Anand. And then I think it came out of that. This was not something that was done in a day or 2 days, but I was doing this. The desire was there for a couple of years, and then a couple of steps that I took in that direction. And in that process, there is always, there were other people, either your current employer or friends, or other people that would actually discourage you from doing that, because people always tell, this is not the right time. This is the extreme step. You're going to do a startup, and not take any salary. So this is a big step, and this should not be done. Obviously there'll be scary stories that somebody would tell, that so you have to just have that. I just had that inner desire. I had that really strong want to be an entrepreneur, to do something different, to create something, to create a product, to show the world that this can be done. So yeah, that was the big push towards that change.
Right. So, if you were to be given a time machine today, and knowing what you know, if you were to go back to 2006,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to the Mukul Kumar of 2006 just before starting Pubmatic?
Yeah, I think the you know I think the advice that I will give to myself is, this is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. So think long term. That is probably the only thing I would tell myself. I always believe that at any point, the decision that you take in the past, that is the right decision based on the data that you have at that point. So I'm really happy the decisions that I took, you know, even earlier on in when I passed out of IIT Kharagpur, or through my different steps in the career into Pubmatic. So I felt that I did the right thing based on the data that I had at that point. But yeah, when I started Pubmatic, I would tell myself that this is going to be a marathon. It's not a sprint, so be ready for a long and very fruitful journey.
Right, right. In fact, the first analogy that came to your mind was also about running. So let me ask you about running.
Yeah, yeah.
You run regularly. Were you always a runner?
No, I was not a runner when earlier on. So I started running about 5 years ago, and I was not always a runner. I mean, I think I I was encouraged by a few runners, and I did a kind of a small course, like a workshop on running. I think 4.5 years ago, and then that kind of encouraged me to run. So yeah, I mean, to me, running is really important. I mean, uh, I do run a few times a week, every alternate day. I mean, I try to run every alternate day. And running, I think, is really important for me. I mean, it's like a habit. It's like a meditation for me. It's like an hour of time for myself. I do solo runs, so I mean, I run alone most of the time. So it's like a meditation. It's the time that I'm with myself. It helps me focus. It helps me focus not only in that run for an hour, but throughout the day. And it also gives me a sense of freedom. So you might have heard of something called a runner's high.
Correct.
So it does give me freedom in the run, gives me a strong feeling of freedom. So yeah, I mean, I like running. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. And we've often heard of, this analogy that, having a startup is like running a marathon. You also
Yeah.
alluded to that. So what has running taught you about life and startups?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I would, by no means I would say I'm a great runner, right? So I'm a recreational runner or amateur runner, I would say. I mean, there's a lot of runners that are a lot better than me. So, but yeah, I would say that it helps you think slightly long term, right? When you're thinking about a marathon, you're thinking long term. You're making sure that you don't run out of energy in the first half of the marathon, and then you have the energy for the entire. So how do you conserve energy, right? How do you conserve cash?
Right.
Right, and you're thinking, you have that mindset. So the mindset is the most important. How do you convince your mind that this is going to be long term? Couple of other things I think are really important is you need to keep working on your goals. So as a runner, you're constantly thinking of your pace goals. How fast are you running? Your goals around multiple other things like the distance goal. So I think that's really important. You are constantly focused on what your goal is. As a startup, you have a product that you're building. You have a release that you have in a couple of weeks or a month. So you're focused on the goal. And the other really important thing is you need to constantly improve on yourself. So no change happens, no big change happens in a day. So when you're thinking about getting your revenue, you're doubling the revenue, or you are doubling the number of customers, or you are getting into a new region for sales. So it doesn't happen instantly. So you are constantly improving on yourself, like you are improving on running. So you are improving on various other metrics, the business metrics, how you scale the business, how you scale the customers. So you're doing that. You're improving that. So you're constantly thinking about improvement, and every day that you improve, you find out in a month or a year you're a lot better than where you started from.
Right, right.
So I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's really key. Yeah,
Yeah, I think the word that we would have used there is compounding, which is a
yeah,
concept that is very close to our hearts. So
exactly.
what you're looking at is compounding. So
Compounding, exactly.
and running is not the only interest that you pursue with passion. I know photography is another one. Are there more such interests and passions that you pursue?
Not a lot. I mean, I think, yeah, you're right. And photography, although I mean, like it's been a while because we haven't been traveling. I mean, I read books. I like watching movies. So I think those are I'm definitely somebody who likes to be fit. So I encourage my team at Pubmatic to exercise regularly. So we have a team, and we are constantly pushing each other to basically at our best. We are at our best from a fitness standpoint. So I think that has gone just beyond running too, and beyond just myself, but actually encouraging close to about 110 people who are all fitness enthusiasts at Pubmatic. So basically encouraging them to get to the next level.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned reading. So any books that have really influenced your thinking?
Yeah, good question. Actually, so in terms of books, yeah, I mean, I think quite a lot, but a couple that I would um, maybe talk about myself is to start with. I mean, I think I was very impressed and I was very influenced by Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People,
Right.
and also his book First Things First. So I think that in the initial years, that definitely helped me a lot. Um, Paul Graham's essays, if you have seen those,
Fantastic.
that has helped me quite a lot. I mean, I used to read them. I still read them quite a lot. I listen to a bunch of podcasts. I really like podcasts from Naval. Um, uh, Nava's podcast. And most recently, I read a couple of books. I mean, I read a book called Predictably Irrational
Daniel.
by Dan
Yeah,
Ariely.
yeah,
So I think it's a really good book about how we think, and how we constantly think irrationally, and how it helps make our decision.
right.
And the most recent book I'm reading is called Skin in the Game. It's about hidden asymmetries in daily life. It's by Nassim Taleb.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean I like that book. But yeah, I mean I would say I read quite a lot of things. I'm influenced by a number of as I read these, I keep hearing about new books, and then I try them out.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
In fact, you mentioned Paul Graham's essays. I think they have this thing about his essays resonate a lot with engineers and engineering leaders, right?
yeah,
Because I think it comes from their world, so they can quickly identify what he's talking about. So on that note, how should engineering leaders be thinking about their future relevance? Just to make
sure.
sure they're being relevant in a forever changing world. How should they be thinking about that?
Yeah. So I mean, um, I guess there's no one single answer, but the most important thing there is to keep learning new things, right? So never stop learning, right? So the world is changing very fast. Technology changes very fast. I mean, I'm deeply involved in advertising, and things change really fast. I mean, literally, things would have changed between Friday and today when I go to and read, some of the news around how things are happening around advertising. So, really important to keep learning new things, keep trying out new things, keep your hands a little dirty with coding, right? Don't. I mean, I would encourage engineering leaders to do that. keep learning new things. Um, One of the things that I follow a lot of leaders and entrepreneurs. So Kunal Shah is one of them, and one of the things he said yesterday is age does not make you old. You become old when your brain resists new music, new cuisines, new artists, new experiences. Resistance is the new ticket to irrelevance.
Right.
So I think that's really important. One of the things there, which kind of goes along with that, is also to have really young friends, like people who are 10 years or 20 years younger than you, because a lot of those new things you learn when you talk to them, when you work with them, you find out. So that's really important, to keep learning new things, to not resist change, right, and keep trying out new things. And that something that goes along with that, which I would say a lot of a lot of old engineers or a lot older engineers would say, would be the amount of experience. So experience is a lot of is a curse when you're not current, right? So you need to constantly upgrade your experience. You have to, a lot of times you have to just unlearn things. I did that when I started Pubmatic, where when I started coding, I had never coded in UI, and I remember learning UI coding, PHP, HTML, JSP, Ajax, pretty much overnight. And in that process, I had to unlearn a few things, where I knew things were done in a certain way, and you have to just say, no, I think things have changed, the world has changed, and you have to redo this. You have to forget what the way things were being done. So I think those are really critical, and a lot of times we get so involved in our day-to-day grind in a way that we forget those things. So it's really important to maybe in a weekend or some other time to rewind and look at, okay, what am I learning? What's the new? What's new have I learned last week or last week? And what I'm going to do new the next week.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
On that note, in fact, we spoke about the importance of networking with Naveen Kabra in another Smartcast episode. So, what is your take on how people go about networking and what should they actually be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty loaded term, networking, because I've seen
Right.
it being used in different contexts at different times. And I mean, networking when in the physical world used to mean when we meet in conferences and talk and and eat. So I think in the current world, it's really it has actually become easier in many ways.
Correct.
So I would say it's important to do networking, because you learn a lot more when you talk to someone, right? When you are exchanging ideas, when they when you're brainstorming something, and they bring up something. I mean, so I'm like constantly talking to some of my friends in the Bay Area, where they're talking about how people are, how engineers are coming up with new ideas about things that we want to do differently. So I think in the current world, networking is critically important. But what you need to think is, what am I learning new from this experience, from this networking conversation? And so that's really important. And I think the more people that you talk to, in many cases, the more people that you talk to, the better it is. In many cases, networking with not exactly your own domain helps quite a lot from thinking in a different direction. Also, networking with a different age of people, I think that's also really important. Like a lot of youngsters are doing really interesting things in colleges, in IITs and BITS. When I went for my um, uh, IIT Kharagpur, get together a couple of years ago, met a bunch of young, team members, a bunch of young students from IIT Kharagpur who are, trying a bunch of new things from their rooms, from hostel rooms. That was really interesting because, obviously we never thought of that when I did my BTech. So yeah, I mean, it's really important to meet people with different interests who are doing different things, trying out new things, or trying out something that never worked before, trying it out differently, and to learn from that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's great advice both for engineering leaders, also in the context of networking. So that Mukul brings us to the last section where I'm going to ask you about the future relevance of a few things that I'm going to ask you about. Think of it like your hot take on these things, right?
Sure.
So what do you think is the future relevance of content marketing?
Yeah, content marketing. I mean, it has relevance. It has great relevance because it has been doing well, and we think. I mean, I think that there's definitely going to be a lot of interest going forward. My take also is that the format is changing quite a lot. If you see video, is really exploding. Video is really exploding at a very fast pace, uh, and the way people are making content available is also changing very fast. Some of those content, the platforms that they come on, they become viral really fast. So I feel that it has a lot of relevance, and you have to constantly see what format is going to be the biggest going forward, and what platform is going to be big going forward, and then kind of tune um, your basically thinking process based on that.
Right. Okay. What do you think is the future relevance of physical events and conferences and things like hackathons?
Sure. I think it's a great question, and I'll tell you my personal feeling. I feel that physical is will continue to be really important. Being physically present, talking about things together in meetings with a whiteboard, in a setting that is very different, helps a lot. So um, I'm hoping that we will get together post COVID, post vaccinations. And that said, I feel that the Zoom way of interfacing, the video conferencing way of interfacing will continue. So it'll actually be better. It'll be actually we'll get double the benefit. So for example, I'm sitting here, and let's say with a few people physically at some point in the future, we can still get on a video call with somebody in Los Angeles, in New York, or in the Bay Area, and I can brainstorm with them. With we can include them. So those boundaries are becoming very less, the very less relevant. Where if I want to brainstorm some idea, I am equally easy scheduling something with person who is in Pune, right next door, compared to somebody who is sitting in the Bay Area. So it has become equally easy. So I feel that we'll see both of the worlds coming together. We will see physical, hackathons, physical get-togethers. At the same time, we'll see the benefit of these, Zoom calls and these video conferences, the presence of high, speed internet, which helps all of us, and all the tools that are available to basically collaborate effectively across multiple locations.
Right. Okay. What is the future relevance of, say, engineering colleges in India?
Um, I, I believe there'll be a lot of relevance, and in addition to getting some really great talent out of those colleges, I mean, that we hire at Pubmatic, what I have seen in the past few years is that a lot of these colleges have some really great projects and some really great competitive projects, and some of them even have, actually most of them have these incubation cells, these startup incubation cells. So they start thinking like in a product mindset, like how do I build a product, how do I kind of reach a customer, how do I do the market fit, how do I find out something that is relevant to my customer, how do I pitch it to a potential investor. So all that is coming in. So I feel that colleges have been transforming lately, and they have been, kind of helping in this thinking process. So this culture of doing startups, thinking in a product mindset, thinking globally, that is happening, and I feel that that is happening because of this culture inside these colleges, and I feel really good about that going forward.
Great. And the final one, Mukul, what is the future relevance of Twitter?
Good question. I mean, I like Twitter. I feel that Twitter has a lot of benefits. In fact, that's my main source of um, uh, knowing a bunch of things. So Twitter, it's really important to have the right set of people that you follow, the right set of lists that you have. You can make your own lists, or follow some other lists, and of course also have the right queries. I write some bunch of advanced queries, which I bookmark, right? So I think those are really important, and also not to get into any conversations which get into arguments which are not non-technical. So I feel it is really good. I am really bullish about Twitter, being a great platform, a great tool, a great collaboration tool, a great tool where I can talk about some of the ideas or some of my thoughts, and then to learn from a lot of people on Twitter, about technology, about science, everything.
Yeah,
I feel
fantastic.
it good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I share my thoughts on the same. I think Twitter is where we have interacted the most before this.
yeah,
So yeah, I would definitely want to use Twitter in the same manner. So
absolutely.
thanks a lot, Mukul. This was a fantastic conversation that we had. I could glean out a few things about the kind of culture and mindset that you have managed to sort of institutionalize within Pubmatic. The can-do attitude like sort of stood out the most for me. So great, and I think lots of important piece of advice for engineering leaders as well. So thanks a lot for
Yeah.
this conversation.
Really good talking to you, Harish. It's a pleasure talking to you, and also it's a pleasure interacting with you on Twitter. So I definitely look forward to meeting with you physically at some point in the future,
Yes.
and having a coffee or a lunch. And thank you for your time today.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good day.